Unit 1. Tape script 1.1.
10 years ago, Monsieur Panier bought a dusty old photograph in an antique market in Paris. It measured just 5.8 centimetres by 4.5 centimetres and showed a rather miserable-looking man with untidy hair. It wasn't very expensive. No one knew who the person was, but for some reason it attracted him. It was not until the picture was cleaned and restored recently that the owner realised what he had found. That photograph has now been identified as perhaps the world's oldest photographic image of a person. Experts believe that the photo was taken in 1837 by Louis Daguerre, who invented the first practical form of photography. At that time, people still thought it was technically impossible to fix the permanent image of a face, and Daguerre's discovery was unknown until 1839. Experts say that the subject, identified as Daguerre's friend Nicolas Huet, had to stand completely still for at least 2 minutes while the photograph was taken from a distance of around 3.7 metres. Monsieur Huet clearly had little faith that his friend's experiment would work, because he had made no effort to comb his wild hair, and he certainly wasn't smiling.
Unit 1. Tape script 1.2.
A 16-year-old British model who is determined to stay at school against her father's advice has won a modelling contract with a large cosmetics company. Anna Pym, who earned £6,500 per day during her school holidays, modelling at shows in New York, has been chosen to appear in television commercials that will be shown worldwide. Her father, Peter Pym, who runs a motor repair business, has urged her to leave school so that she can take full advantage of her earning power. But Anna has refused to stop studying for her 3 A-level subjects: maths, history of art, and design technology.
I will be able to fit most of the filming around my holidays, so hopefully I won't need to take too much time off school. Passing my exams will give me much more satisfaction than any modelling assignment. What I really want to do is go to university.
Unit 1. Tape script 1.3.
Zach, how long have you been a model?
Well, I'm 23 now, and I guess I started when I was about 19.
And was it always an ambition of yours?
Not at all. In fact, an agent approached me. She saw me in a cafe in Covent Garden in London and gave me her business card.
And so you went to see her?
Yeah, I was at university at the time.
And have you been working with that agency ever since?
Not now, actually. I was with her for about 2 years, but I wasn't really getting enough work, so I changed. You can spend a lot of time sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring in this job, you know? Although, when it does, it feels great.
What's been your most exciting job so far?
Well, I did the autumn collections in Milan a few years ago, and that was pretty amazing. Very hard work, but great fun.
And what's been your worst experience?
Well, the worst thing was the time when I tripped up and fell over as I walked onto the catwalk at a really big fashion show in London. It wasn't my fault. There was something wrong with the carpet. But the worst thing was the designer. She went mad because, you know, it meant attention was taken away from the clothes. The way she went on about it, you'd think I did it on purpose. And it got on TV, so all my family saw it too. So did all my friends.
Do you think modelling has changed the way people look at you?
In some ways, yeah. A few people, if they don't know me well, assume I must be really rich or that I go out with film stars and all that sort of thing. My real friends know I'm just an ordinary guy, really. I don't try to live up to the image people have of top models. So my friends' attitude towards me hasn't changed at all.
And what about your family? Are they happy that you've become a model?
My father has always been against it. So has my mother, in a way. They don't see it as a real career. They think I should be getting some qualifications.
I wanted to ask you about that. How did you manage to combine your university course and your modelling career?
Well, I didn't, basically. It was a question of priorities. The modelling work always came at the wrong moment, so I got behind with my studies, and eventually I dropped out altogether.
Any thoughts of going back?
No. But I'll have to do something, because the older you get, the less likely it is that you're going to make it, you know, become really well known or make a lot of money. There's always new, younger models being discovered, and you begin to lose your looks as you get older.
And so what about the future? Do you want to carry on modelling?
I haven't made any plans. I'm still hoping for a big break. I'm interested in fashion journalism, though, so maybe I'll do that later.
Well, good luck, whatever you do, and thanks for talking to me.
Thanks.
Unit 1. Tape script 1.4. 1A.
Contract.
B.
Contract.
2A.
Commerce.
B.
Commercial.
3A.
Satisfy.
B.
Satisfaction.
4A.
Assign.
B.
Assignment.
5A.
React.
B.
Reaction.
6A.
Photograph.
B.
Photographic.
Unit 1. Tape script 1.5.
Now, you mentioned that you'd always wanted to be a model.
Yes, ever since I took part in a fashion show at school.
So that's how it all started?
Yes, plus the fact that I won a competition in a local newspaper.
Actually, I was going to ask you about that. Could you explain in more detail exactly how that helped you?
Unit 1. Tape script 1.6.
Personally, I don't think we should choose an image of a man wearing a dark suit and carrying an umbrella.
I agree. Let's not have that because it's a bit old-fashioned, isn't it?
In my opinion, we should include an image of the Houses of Parliament, because everybody recognises that as an image of Britain.
I feel it would be better to include an image of how young people live. Surely that's what students want to see.
Absolutely. It's really important to include that kind of image. That's the kind of thing young people can relate to.
Unit 1. Tape script 1.7.
I think it's really important to look good. I've heard that it's harder to get a job if you're unattractive than if you've got no qualifications.
Looking good isn't only about being thin. I'm less bothered about being thin than being happy. If you've got good exam results and a nice personality, you'll get a good job. I wouldn't want to work for someone who only cared about my appearance.
All my friends talk about their image, the clothes they wear and their appearance. I had a girlfriend last year who wasn't very attractive. My friends teased me about her, but I didn't care. She had a fantastic personality.
I've been on a diet for nearly a month now. All my friends are dieting too. It's important to look good. It's the only way to be popular. If you don't look good, no one wants to be your friend.
Unit 2. Tape script 2.1.
An unusual sound can be heard in many classrooms in Britain nowadays. The sound of students and teachers laughing. The idea of introducing humour into the classroom originated in the United States, where experts proved that a rigid disciplinarian approach to learning often demotivated students. The studies concluded that humour was a way of motivating people to learn. I talked to education expert Dr. Sam Barnes.
Visitors to our school are often surprised to see students and teachers laughing, but everyone at all levels is beginning to realise that if students can enjoy studying, the chances of being successful are that much greater. We reckon that humour in class can not only help to improve concentration, it can also help students to get better results.
Unit 2. Tape script 2.2.
Well, for anyone moving to another country, I suppose the first thing you've got to get used to is the jokes. Things like, what's the greatest academic contradiction? Answer, American history. And, did you hear about the American who wouldn't go to see Shakespeare's Henry V because he hadn't seen the other four? And I haven't even started on the political jokes or the imitation of the accent. I moved to England from New York some years ago, when I was 11, in fact. With the quick perception that 11-year-olds seem to have, I quickly came to learn that the name of the game was not to be different from everybody else, but to try to fit in. I immediately started work on getting rid of my accent and tried to become as English as possible. Instead of asking for coffee, it was, "Earl Grey tea, please." I suppose we kids found our parents' Americanness a little embarrassing, so we tried to immerse ourselves completely in the culture of our new city. We wore British-style clothes, ate bacon and eggs for breakfast, and watched Neighbours on TV after school. By the time I was studying for my last school exams, I had almost begun to reject any connections I'd previously had with the States. When I did go to university, I chose the oldest, most English university I could find. And can you guess what my subject was? English literature, of course. My sister was, and still is, more adaptable. She's always been able to switch from one accent to another, and is as at home in London as she is in the States. For her, it's not a question of self-identity. My accent remains mid-Atlantic. I think part of my continuing embarrassment was the fact that I didn't like myself much. Maybe it was my teenage way of blaming my parents for moving us to London. Other teenagers reject their parents' dress sense. I rejected their nationality. After university, I lived in France for a year. I slowly stopped feeling sensitive about my nationality. I stopped being afraid that people would make unfair judgments about me. More importantly, I decided to stop taking myself so seriously. I still find myself waiting for the inevitable American joke, but clearly I'm getting better at coming to terms with my dual nationality. After all, I've told you all how I feel, haven't I?
Unit 2, Tape Script 2.3.
I'm a perfumer. I suppose I've been lucky to get a job like this because there are only about 500 perfumers in the entire world. You don't need any particular qualifications, only a good sense of smell. Well, the company I work for has a branch in Paris, so after I've been with them for a while, I asked if I could be transferred there. I'd always wanted to live there, and to my surprise, they said yes. It was tough at first because, of course, you need to speak French, and mine wasn't that hot. For the first 6 months, I felt like a complete idiot and had nothing to say at all. I'm fine now, though. I've had French lessons and I'm fluent. I can't get rid of my accent, but people tell me that the French like an English accent. I'll never be able to pass myself off as a Frenchman, but that's probably an advantage. I'm a bit of a novelty. Living in Paris is great. The area I live in is quite trendy. There are loads of restaurants and cafes. The downside is that the traffic is appalling and people are sometimes rude. But that's the same in any big city, isn't it? Another thing is that everyone I meet seems to smoke, and I'm trying to give it up, which isn't very easy. But I do still appreciate what a beautiful city Paris is, especially at night. I was only supposed to be here for 18 months, but I've been promoted and I'm thinking of staying here permanently. There's a prestige thing too. If you want to work in making fine perfumes for big names, then yes, it's better to be working in Paris.
Unit 2, Tape Script 2.4.
Do you think you and your family will ever go and live in another country?
Well, on the one hand, it might be possible, but on the other hand, it's unlikely. What about you?
Of course, I'd like to think it might happen, but I'm not sure if it ever will. There's no doubt that it would be interesting, but it might be quite difficult too.
Unit 2, Tape Script 2.6.
American psychologists used to believe that positive thinking was the best approach to happiness. Now they think that defensive pessimists may suffer less. Although positive thinking is useful in some situations, cheerfulness can sometimes be taken too far. Pressure to be happy makes some people feel worse instead of better. Being honest with yourself and saying how you feel can be liberating. Instead of trying to persuade themselves that everything will be all right, defensive pessimists anticipate making mistakes. This means that they prepare for every possible eventuality and perform better. For example, when going to a job interview, because they fear things could go wrong, defensive pessimists get up early and leave themselves plenty of time to get to the interview, and they prepare for every possible question. As a result, they do better than optimists who just hope for the best.
Unit 2, Tape Script 2.7.
Father said, "We'll sail like Columbus." He was hoping to find India, I pointed out sullenly. We sold the zoo lock, stock, and barrel to a new country, a new life. Besides assuring our collection of a happy future, the transaction would pay for immigration and leave us with a good sum to make a fresh start in Canada. Though now, when I think about it, the sum is laughable. How blinded we are by money. We could have sold our animals to zoos in India, but American zoos were willing to pay higher prices. CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, had just come into effect, and the window on the trading of captured wild animals had slammed shut. The future of zoos would now lie with other zoos. The Pondicherry Zoo closed shop at just the right time. There was a scramble to buy our animals. The final buyers were a number of zoos, mainly the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago and the soon-to-be-open Minnesota Zoo. But odd animals were going to Los Angeles, Louisville, Oklahoma City, and Cincinnati. And 2 animals were being shipped to the Canada Zoo. That's how Ravi and I felt. We did not want to go. We did not want to live in a country of gale-force winds and minus 200-degree winters. Canada was not on the cricket map. Departure was made easier, as far as getting us used to the idea, by the time it took for all the pre-departure preparations. It took well over a year. I don't mean for us, I mean for the animals, considering that animals dispense with clothes, footwear, linen, furniture, kitchenware, toiletries, that nationality means nothing to them, that they care not a jot for passports, money, employment prospects, schools, cost of housing, healthcare facilities. Considering, in short, their lightness of being, it's amazing how hard it is to move them. Moving a zoo is like moving a city. The paperwork was colossal. Liters of water used up in wedding stamps. Dear Mr. So-and-so written hundreds of times. Offers made. Sighs heard. Doubts expressed. Haggling to be gone through. Decisions sent higher up for approval. Prices agreed upon. Deals clinched. Dotted lines signed. Congratulations given. Certificates of origin sought. Certificates of health sought. Export permits sought. Import permits sought. Quarantine regulations clarified. Transportation organized. A fortune spent on telephone calls. It's a joke in the zoo business, a weary joke, that the paperwork involved in trading a shrew weighs more than an elephant, that the paperwork involved in trading an elephant weighs more than a whale, and that you must never try to trade a whale. Never. A deputation of 3 Americans came. I was very curious. I had never seen real live Americans. They were pink, fat, friendly, very competent, and sweated profusely. They examined our animals. They put most of them to sleep, and then applied stethoscopes to hearts, drew blood in syringes and analyzed it, fondled humps and bumps, tapped teeth, blinded eyes with flashlights, pinched skins, stroked and pulled hairs. Poor animals. They must have thought that they were being drafted into the U.S. Army. We got big smiles from the Americans and bone-crushing handshakes. The result was that the animals, like us, got their working papers. They were future Yankees, and we, future Canucks.
Unit 3, Tape Script 3.1.
Well, it's Friday morning, and here I am, high on a wind-swept craggy outcrop somewhere in the mists above Glencoe in the Scottish Highlands. I'm playing the role of a climber who's taken a tumble, and I'm lying unconscious. Now, never mind my pretend broken hip. If help doesn't get here soon, hypothermia will finish me off. But I can hear an excited bark, and yes, it's a warm nose that's nuzzling into me. Well done, Corrie. Clever dog. So, Corrie, the search and rescue dog, has found his man. I'm here to cover the annual assessment weekend of the Search and Rescue Dog Association of Scotland. It's a busy time for all the dogs and handlers who want to gain a place on one of the 28 Scottish rescue dog teams. It's a tough test. Rescue dogs have to be trusted with farm animals, they shouldn't be frightened when rescue flares go off, and they can't afford to be nervous when they're being winched up into a helicopter. The great thing about these dogs is that they're all pets. Like their owners, all members of the Scottish Mountain Rescue Teams, they're on call to attend any emergency involving people missing in the mountains. Working with the police and the RAF Mountain Rescue Teams, the dogs soon arrive at the site of a search. Last year, 184 Scottish rescue dogs performed more than 53 searches. Because a dog can pick up the scent of a person some 500 yards from where they're lying, often buried in the snow, it can save hours of time. It's been estimated that one dog's efforts are equivalent to those of 20 to 40 people. It takes at least 2 years to train a dog, using techniques developed by teams working in British cities during the Second World War. Today's mountain rescue owes a lot to the foresight of Hamish McInnes, the leader of the Glencoe Mountain Rescue Team, who was invited to Switzerland to see the work of avalanche dogs. He started a training course in Scotland with 6 dogs and their handlers. Canine search and rescue has come a long way since. But watching the dogs, Midge, Corrie and Holly at work above Glencoe is a revelation. Somewhere out there, buried deep in a snow hole, is Stuart, Corrie's owner. A sniff here, a scratch there, and in no time, they've found him. Lots of praise, a squeaky toy reward, and they're happy. It's me next. And as I'm lowered into the snow again, I can't help hoping that the dogs haven't lost their touch. I needn't worry, though. I'm assured that it'll only be a matter of minutes until a grinning canine face appears above me, looking as if it wants to play. Good girl, Holly. The next round of dog biscuits is on me.
Unit 3, Tape Script 3.2.
I'm playing the role of a climber.
Unit 3, Tape Script 3.3.
1.
But I can hear an excited bark.
2.
I'm here to cover the annual assessment weekend of the Search and Rescue.
3.
It's a tough test.
4.
When they're being winched up into a helicopter.
5.
Who was invited to Switzerland to see the work of avalanche dogs.
6.
It's me next.
7.
I needn't worry, though.
8.
It'll only be a matter of minutes.
Unit 3, Tape Script 3.4.
Rescuers were searching for more survivors last night after a tornado struck in Oklahoma, injuring 800 people. Entire towns have been destroyed as the storm raced across Midwest America. Joe Watson is there. Hello, Joe.
Yes, today thousands of people are relying on emergency shelter, food, and water after one of the worst storms in history. Survivors have been telling how they emerged from their basements to find that their houses and their neighbors' houses had simply vanished. This is how the mayor of Oklahoma City, Kirk Humphreys, described the scene.
It looks as if there's been an explosion.
The town of Moore, just south of Oklahoma City, was the worst hit. One resident, Ann Richardson, told me she'd survive by hiding in her storm cellar.
There was no point trying to escape. The only way to protect ourselves was to get underground. When I came out, I looked for my house, but it just wasn't there.
The weathermen described it as the worst tornado they'd seen.
One tornado was more than a mile wide. It was a wall of death. It was the biggest tornado we've ever seen.
Chad Harris, who was asleep inside his trailer when the tornado struck.
I'm lucky to be alive. I couldn't believe what was happening. It was a nightmare. The trailer rolled over several times. It was the most frightening experience of my life.
And nurse Ruth Hensley sheltered under a bridge in Moore.
Yeah, I stayed under the bridge, and I watched the tornado pass by. A woman was injured. I helped her. Her son just flew up into the air. He was pulled right off his feet. His mother managed to hang on to him and pull him down, but she was hurt, and their house was completely destroyed.
This is Joe Watson, Oklahoma, returning you to the studio.
Thank you, Joe. The storms are thought to have reached F5 level. That's the worst possible for tornadoes. Tell us what that means.
At this level, houses are lifted off their foundations. Cars fly through the air. Trains are overturned.
Unit 3, Tape Script 3.5. The 39 Steps.
I was just fitting my key into the door when I noticed a man at my elbow. I had not seen him approach, and the sudden appearance made me start. He was a slim man with a short brown beard and small blue eyes. I recognized him as the occupant of a flat on the top floor with whom I had passed the time of day on the stairs. "Can I speak to you?" he said. "May I come in for a minute?" He was steadying his voice with an effort, and his hand was pawing my arm. I got my door opened and motioned him in. No sooner was he over the threshold than he made a dash for my back room, where I used to smoke and write my letters. Then he bolted back. "Is the door locked?" he asked feverishly, and he fastened the chain with his own hand. "I'm very sorry," he said humbly. "It's a mighty liberty, but you looked the kind of man who would understand. I've had you in my mind all this week when things got troublesome. Say, will you do me a good turn?" "I'll listen to you," I said. "That's all I'll promise." "I'm a bit rattled tonight," he said. "You see, I happen, at this moment, to be dead." "What does it feel like?" I asked. I was pretty certain that I had to deal with a madman. A small smile flickered over his drawn face. "You see, I need help more than any man ever needed it, and I want to know if I can count you in." "Get on with your story," I said, "and I'll tell you." He was an American from Kentucky, and after college, being pretty well off, he had started out to see the world. He wrote a bit and acted as war correspondent for a Chicago paper, and spent a year or two in southeastern Europe. He spoke familiarly of many names I remembered having seen in the newspapers. He had played about with politics, he told me, at first for the interest of them, and then because he couldn't help himself. I am giving you what he told me as well as I could make it out. Away behind all the governments and the armies, there was a subterranean movement going on, engineered by dangerous people. He had come across it by accident. It fascinated him. He went further and then got caught. I gathered that most of the people in it were the sort of educated anarchists that make revolutions, and that beside them were financiers who were playing for money. A clever man can make profits from a falling market, and it suited the book of both classes to hold Europe by the ears. He told me some strange things that explained a lot that had puzzled me. Things that had happened in the Balkan War, how one state suddenly came out on top, why alliances were made and broken, why certain men disappeared, and where the origins of war came from. The aim of the whole conspiracy was to set Russia and Germany against each other. I thought for an instant or two. Right, I'll trust you. I believe you're straight, but if you are not, I should warn you that I'm a handy man with a gun.
Unit 4, Tape Script 4.1.
Speaker 1, Jessica Lehman.
We choose the most up-to-date news first from what we've read in the papers or magazines. Then we use the internet to get more information. But it can be hard to track things down unless you know exactly what you're looking for. Newspaper archives on the web are excellent, but I don't think the web has changed the way people get their day-to-day news. Well, most people in this country read about current events on the train or over breakfast. Where the web's had a huge impact is in getting more information about what you've already read.
Speaker 2, John Woodcock.
I don't spend hours surfing the net for news. The print version is still superior. Some websites are worth a glance, but they don't yet have the same in-depth coverage as most magazines and papers. In future, I think the net will allow greater diversity of interests, but access isn't advanced enough yet to make it as user-friendly as picking up a magazine or paper. But that's changing all the time. I do think newspapers and magazines will still be around in 10 years' time in the sense that they'll still be brand names, but the move to electronic media will continue.
Speaker 3, Chris Campbell.
Once the internet moves into mainstream television broadcasting, a lot of the text-based news services on the net will become obsolete. The web's role as a news provider will become less important as the entertainment industry moves into interactive broadcasting. Newspapers and magazines in their traditional form will then become more relevant, as they'll be the only place you can find news without being constantly bothered by advertising. Frankly, my job involves spending so much time in front of computers that I avoid using the net for fun.
Speaker 4, Richard Colburn.
I read some newspapers and magazines in print and others on the internet. Within 10 years, I think online operations may become even more important within media organisations because the internet has the advantage of speed. When major stories break, people will go straight to the web as they go to news channels now. But I'm still unsure about claims that the internet will kill off broadcasting or the press. TV and radio are convenient and comfortable, and picking up a newspaper or magazine is far more enjoyable than reading from a screen.
Speaker 5, John T. Small.
Newspapers and magazines needn't be too worried. I think new technology will supplement rather than replace them, at least while computers are less pleasant or convenient. Some websites are good and their information's reliable, although information found on most internet sites can't be relied on. But they're a resource rather than a habit, like taking a newspaper or buying your favourite magazine. Once they start to offer something noticeably different, then the future will become more interesting. The way in which the net develops will shape how we see and receive our news and information about what's going on in the world.
Unit 4, Tape Script 4.2.
1.
I don't spend hours surfing the net for news.
2.
I don't spend hours surfing the net for news.
3.
I don't spend hours surfing the net for news.
4.
I don't spend hours surfing the net for news.
5.
I don't spend hours surfing the net for news.
Unit 4, Tape Script 4.3.
The real difference between TV and radio news is the pictures.
I couldn't agree with you more. But after a while, even the pictures don't make much impression on you.
Actually, I'm not sure if I agree with that. They can be quite upsetting at times.
You have a point there. But sometimes you see the same thing so many times that you just stop taking any notice.
True.
Unit 4, Tape Script 4.4.
Speaker 1.
I think it's true to say that the most popular programmes on television are soap operas. People think of them as escapism, but this isn't necessarily the case. The stories in soaps often reflect reality. They show people in difficult situations, such as divorce or death, and how they cope. I think they show you what to do and what not to do in certain situations.
Speaker 2.
Nowadays, with digital TV, people have hundreds of channels to choose from and far more soap operas to watch. The problem is that many channels could show endless reruns of poor-quality soaps which sensationalise, trivialise and generally set a bad example. They use shocking or controversial storylines to attract viewers, and worryingly, many of these viewers are children.
Speaker 3.
Soaps are really popular with teenagers. In fact, more teenagers watch adult soaps than watch children's programmes. Young people also use catchphrases from American and Australian soap operas, such as, "That is so not true," and "I'll get it sorted," and "No worries, mate." And a recent survey found out that teenagers were more familiar with the American police emergency number 911 than our own 999.
Speaker 4.
I love soap operas, and so do my children, because some things such as bullying or relationship problems are dealt with in soaps. They feel they can talk more easily about these issues. I also think soaps can be very moral. All in all, they set a good example. The good guys always win and the bad guys are always punished.
Unit 5, Tape Script 5.1.
Rachel Anderson is Britain's only female football agent. She's also a former journalist who knows the power of the press. Rachel, welcome to the studio today.
Hi, Darren. It's good to be here.
So, Rachel, I've been dying to ask you, how did you become a football agent?
Actually, I was doing an aerobics course and I was talking about how the reporters can give players a hard time, even though they're good players, and how some players couldn't really deal with the press very well. Anyway, it turned out that footballer Julian Dick's wife was in the class and she said I was right. She asked me for some advice and pointed out that women were often more successful at handling the press tactfully than men. And, well...
So it was quite by accident, really. Things just took off from there, as it were.
That's right. They both sort of challenged me to be his agent for a year.
And what does a football agent actually do? I suspect it's not a 9-to-5 job.
As a matter of fact, from about 7 in the morning to sometimes 11 at night, I talk to loads of people. If a player is happy at a club, I can make their career more successful by getting them sponsorship. If they're unhappy, I try to find them another club to play for. I always encourage players to have an alternative career, just in case they're injured. It makes sense.
And if it's not a rude question, how much do you earn?
Anything between £25,000 and £100,000 a year, if I'm lucky.
That sounds like an awful lot of money to me.
It does, but you have to remember that I pay all my expenses myself. That includes flights, for example. And I pay 5 people to work for me on a part-time basis, you know. So, believe me, it's nowhere near as much as it sounds.
True, but even so, it's more than most people make in a year. Have you always liked football?
Not at all. My family were all rugby people. But I went to matches with friends and it sort of grew from that.
But you have played the game yourself, haven't you?
Good heavens, not me.
Oh.
I've got better things to do with my time.
Would you like to see more women working in football?
If they're good enough, yes. But like everything else, success depends on how good you are, rather than on whether you're male or female.
And what does your family think of your career?
Oh, they're over the moon. It gives them a lot of street cred because I meet so many famous footballers.
Rachel, thanks for joining us in the studio today.
Unit 5, Tape Script 5.2. 1.
Fact. Happy. Pay. Male.
2,
Sense. Seen. Mean. Press.
3,
Women. Injured. Time. Give.
4,
Job. Only. From. Most.
5,
Rugby. Huge. Must. Unhappy.
Unit 5, Tape Script 5.3.
I think nowadays women want similar things to men.
I'm not sure if I agree with that. You know, I think men and women are looking for different things in life.
Well, I suppose you could be right. But what about things like playing football? There are a lot of female football players. As a matter of fact, I play football for a local women's team.
So, you might become another David Beckham, a sort of female superstar.
Believe me, I wouldn't want that. Anyway, there's not much chance of that happening, is there?
You never know.
Unit 5, Tape Script 5.5.
When most people get fed up with their daily routine, they have a haircut or go on holiday. Not Tom Fremantle. He was feeling a bit bored, so he cycled 12,746 miles to Australia. Tom, what really made you want to go to Australia? What were you doing before you went?
I'd been working as a journalist for many years and I was making steady progress in my career. Then, wham, I decided to throw in the towel and ride a bicycle off into the sunset. Many of my friends thought I was a bit crazy, but they were all very supportive. They realised I was chasing a big dream.
Now, you were travelling by bicycle, so I suppose you had to travel light. What's essential and what can you leave behind?
Yes, I had to travel very light.
What did you take?
The bare essentials, my tent, stove and camping gear, some books, a couple of changes of clothes and, of course, my bicycle repair kit.
Were you really carrying all your own gear? Not sending things on ahead or having a car driving along with you?
No, I was carrying all my own kit and had no sort of backup team. I like to travel very simply, as that way I find local people are more willing to put me up. I'm only about 5'5", so I pose no physical threat either. I like to travel with a sense of trust and hope. I always take photographs of my family and friends. If you're in places where you don't speak the language, I went through 24 countries altogether, including Syria, Iran, Tibet and Cambodia. Photos are a wonderful barrier breaker.
And is it expensive, a trip like that? You haven't got airfares, but you must have had some other expenses. How did you raise the money?
The trip cost me about £5,000. I spent most nights camping, staying with families, or else in budget guest houses and hostels. I spent most of the trip travelling through countries where I could usually comfortably live on less than £5 a day. Obviously, I had few transport costs because for most of the trip I was on a bicycle saddle. Throughout the journey, I was raising money for Stoke Mandeville Hospital, which helps patients with spinal injuries. By the end of the journey, a total of $43,000 had been raised to buy high-tech wheelchairs.
Tell us about the trip. How difficult was it to cycle such a long way? What sort of difficulties did you have to overcome?
Well, it was an extraordinary journey. I pedalled through the cobbled streets of Paris and Rome, across the deserts of the Middle East, over the Himalayas, through the jungles of Indochina, and ended up in the stark beauty of the Australian outback. At times it was tough, but I never seriously thought about giving up.
Long trips like this are often a way of finding yourself, aren't they? What did you discover about yourself?
To be honest, I think to do a journey like this, you have to know yourself incredibly well before setting off. I didn't find myself, but I certainly had a wonderful experience and learnt far more during those 16 months on the road than I ever did at school.
What sort of things?
Well, if I, a stumpy-legged Englishman with a bad sense of direction and limited language skills, can make it halfway across the world on a bicycle, it can't be so bad out there. The other thing the journey did was to shatter my preconceived ideas about certain places. Travelling alone and on a bicycle, I found people across the world were willing to hold out the hand of friendship, irrespective of creed, class or colour. It was a very positive and humbling experience.
And why did you go to Australia? You could have gone anywhere, couldn't you?
I was following an ancestor of mine, Captain Charles Fremantle. Captain Charles is my great-great-great-great-uncle. I think that's the right amount of greats. He sailed to Western Australia back in 1829, and the port of Fremantle was named after him. He wrote a wonderful journal about his experiences, and that's what encouraged me to follow in his wake. I can't sail, though, so that's why I decided to bicycle instead.
And what are you doing now?
I've still got the travel bug. Last year I walked from Mexico to New York in the footsteps of another ancestor of mine. Next year, I'm hoping to follow the Scottish explorer Mungo Park, who travelled in West Africa in 1795. I hope to paddle a dugout canoe to Timbuktu. So I still like to travel very simply. And, well, after that trip, I hope to finally settle down.
Tom Fremantle, thank you very much for talking to us. Tom has published books about his travels. Johnny Ginger's Last Ride is about cycling to Australia, and Moonshine Mule is about his walk through America.
Progress Test 1. Test Tape Script 1.
Hello, and welcome to our weekly series about the different foods that you can eat in Britain. Today, John Green goes to Birmingham to meet a Chinese family, the Tans, who have been serving up Chinese takeaway meals for more than a quarter of a century.
This is Sturchley in Birmingham, and although I can see 4 Indian restaurants in the space of 100 yards, I've actually come to East End, a Chinese takeaway. The Tans haven't spent a huge amount on interior design. Just peering through the window, it's simple. Just 4 chairs, a counter, a TV, a Chinese calendar. There's always a Chinese calendar. Now, from the outside, what is pretty impressive is that you can see straight through to the kitchen in the background. This is a hive of activity, with Mr. and Mrs. Tan, together with their daughter, hard at work. East End, I suppose, is probably representative of all the other 10,000 Chinese takeaways up and down the country. And we British have an almost insatiable appetite for Chinese food. And it's reckoned now that, after fish and chips, a Chinese is still the most popular takeaway, accounting for about 210 million meals annually. Well, I can see a menu which looks set into the top of the counter, so I want to go in and find out a bit more.
Test Tape Script 2.
Hello, I'm Ricky Tan, and I'm here with my family who run the business. My mum and dad and my little sister who helps out on Fridays and Saturdays.
So, you've got your parents in the kitchen cooking away. Tell me, what's the history of this particular shop?
It's been here about a year and a half. No, a year and 3 quarters now, so it's building up quite a big regular business.
Your parents started it?
Yes, but they'd been in the business for 25 years before that. I've worked in this shop from day one, unfortunately.
Why do you say that?
Well, I don't get time to socialise with my friends or do things like that because I'm stuck here 6 days a week from 3 p.m. onwards till 12.
So since school you've always been working?
Well, actually, after school, I went to university and studied history. But after that, with no job to go to, I thought I'd come and join the family business for the time being, until I've saved enough to do a postgraduate degree.
So, when you were growing up, were you expected to help your parents out?
We all helped out now and again, yeah. Mopping the floors, maybe cutting some vegetables. And we always lived above the family shop, really, so I couldn't get away from it. If I wanted a glass of milk, I had to come downstairs in my pyjamas. It was embarrassing. I used to envy the other children who didn't have to share their house, but in fact, the other kids at school envied me with all that food around.
Unit 6, Tape Script 6.1.
As you may or may not know, Stonehenge is the most famous and most frequently visited monument in Britain. What you probably don't know is that the name comes from an Old English word, hengen, which means hanging stones. According to experts, Stonehenge must have been built between 2500 and 2000 BC. It was originally thought that the Druids, priests of the Celtic people who lived in England, might have constructed the building. But it's now agreed that the Druids couldn't have done so, as they didn't arrive in the country until many years later. In addition, such fine stonework dating to that period has not been found anywhere else in northwest Europe. So people think that the construction may have been in the hands either of a man from Greece or from Crete, or someone who knew a lot about stone monuments in those countries. Where the stones came from is also a bit of a mystery. They could have come from South Wales, over 100 miles away, but it must have taken a tremendous effort in those days to drag the stones all that way. There have been many disagreements about what the purpose of the building was, but various possibilities emerge. It could have been a religious building, or it might have been a place where people studied the stars.
Unit 6, Tape Script 6.2.
Kate, Bob, welcome to the studio today.
Thanks.
It's good to be here.
Now, you're just coming to the end of a very successful run of your latest series of Out of This World. Why do you think it's been so popular?
Well, I think it has the right mix of ingredients. You know, mystery, suspense, alien beings, that kind of thing. But most of all, it's got good script writers. I think that's the real secret of its success.
I'd go along with that. You see, a lot of second-rate programs, and they're not second-rate because of the special effects or even the acting. It's like Bob says, it's what the characters are saying that counts.
And did you imagine that when the series began, it would become a kind of cult series?
Not at all. It was the last thing anyone expected. Neither of us was that well known on TV at the time. We'd mostly done work for the theater, hadn't we, Bob?
Absolutely. The offer to do TV work came out of the blue. And, of course, it raises your profile straight away, as everybody recognizes you after a few weeks. Bit of a pain, really, because you sort of lose that freedom you had when you were less well known.
But don't you get a bit tired of appearing in a series which constantly seems to be about some being from outer space or some unknown life form on this planet?
Oh, no way! I love the stories behind each series. As a child, science fiction was my favorite sort of literature. My friends were all reading love stories, but I was into science fiction in a big way. Beings from outer space or strange viruses which were about to wipe out the human race.
Actually, I'm a bit more skeptical, I'm afraid. I take all these stories with a pinch of salt. I'd rather be watching the latest spy movie than reading all this nonsense about science fiction.
So, what else do you both do to escape from the seemingly endless round of ghastly occurrences that are part of your everyday screen lives? Do you see each other off set, or have you had enough of each other's company at the end of a day's filming?
Strangely enough, we're both into hill walking in a big way. It's a great way to see the countryside. We like setting off at the crack of dawn and staying out all day. We escape whenever we can, which, sad to say, isn't that often.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It makes no difference what the weather's like. Whatever it wants to throw at us doesn't put us off in the slightest. I suppose we've had such a good training in some of the dreadful conditions on the set. It seems like a holiday when we're doing it for pleasure.
Now, looking ahead, what's in store? Do you ever feel that if you stay in the series for much longer, you're both going to get typecast?
I suppose, in a way, we are already. I only have to get out of a taxi at the airport for someone to call out my character name in the series. I'm not even sure how many people even know us by our real names.
And does that matter to you?
I think if I'm being really honest with myself, it probably doesn't. I don't care whether I'm recognized for myself or my role. I'm happy in my work and not particularly worried if nothing else comes along.
I have to admit that I'm ambitious. That's not to say that I wouldn't be happy to stay in the series or even do another series if we were offered one.
Which we might not be, of course.
Judging by the ratings you had for the one that's just finishing, that might be highly unlikely.
Maybe, but you never know. Being an actor's, well, a very insecure profession. There's no denying the fact. But maybe Kate's right. It may be time to move on to pastures new. But for the moment, I think we'll keep our options open.
Who knows what we'll be doing this time next year? We like to keep people guessing, just like we do in the series.
Well, Kate, Bob, thanks for coming to the studio to talk to us today.
It's a pleasure.
Not at all.
Unit 6, Tape Script 6.3. Example.
Known, brown, blown, moan, alone.
1.
Enough, through, thorough, tough, cough.
2.
Blue, drew, to, through, took.
3.
Right, height, sight, 8, light.
4.
Course, worse, horse, force, course.
5.
Care, wear, fear, bear, fair.
Unit 6, Tape Script 6.4.
If you ask me, they could have something to do with the factory.
It can't be anything to do with that. The factory must have been there for some time. People would have started falling ill before now, surely.
Not necessarily. These things often take some time to have an effect.
But don't you think that the factory is the most likely explanation?
I can't see what else it could be.
Unit 6, Tape Script 6.5. The Runaway.
I stopped the car to see if she was all right. The girl must have been in her teens. She certainly wasn't older than 18. She had short, dark hair and a sad expression on her face. Her face was wet, and I thought perhaps she might have been crying. When I asked her what was wrong, she frowned and said she was running away. I smiled and told her that perhaps she shouldn't have left home on such a cold night, and offered to take her back. It was freezing now, and the stars shone brightly in the winter sky. She was very cold, so I helped her into the back of the car and covered her up with a coat. Her name was Sarah Pritchard, and she lived with her mother and 2 brothers in a nearby village. As I carried on along the road, it seemed to get colder. Poor thing, I thought. She looked so tired. After about 10 minutes, we arrived at a house on the edge of the village. I got out of the car and knocked on the door. A middle-aged woman opened it. She looked at me suspiciously when I explained that I'd brought her daughter home. "Daughter?" she said. "But I haven't got a daughter." The girl must have mistaken the house, I thought. After all, it was a dark night. "Her name's Sarah Pritchard," I said hopefully. "Maybe you know where she lives." The woman's face went pale. "Pritchard," she whispered. "Why, they used to live here, but they moved out years ago. There was a family tragedy. A road accident, I think." I was surprised, but perhaps I ought to have been more worried. As I walked back to the car, I started to feel uneasy. There was no sign of Sarah. All that remained was a crumpled coat on the back seat. I'm sure it can't have been a ghost because they don't exist. But what other explanation could there be?
Unit 6, Tape Script 6.6. The Sound Machine.
It may, who knows. So far I've had no luck. But I've made some changes in it, and tonight I'm ready for another trial. This machine, he said, touching it with his hands, is designed to pick up sound vibrations that are too high-pitched for reception by the human ear, and to convert them to a scale of audible tones. I tune it in, almost like a radio. It isn't complicated. Say I wish to listen to the squeak of a bat. That's a fairly high-pitched sound, about 30,000 vibrations a second. The average human ear can't quite hear it. Now, if there were a bat flying around this room, and I tuned into 30,000 on my machine, I would hear the squeaking of that bat very clearly. I would even hear the correct note, F-sharp or B-flat or whatever it might be, but merely at a much lower pitch. Don't you understand? The doctor looked at the long black coffin box. And you're going to try it tonight? Yes. He placed the box carefully on a small wooden table that stood on the lawn. He returned to the shed and fetched a pair of earphones. He plugged the wire connections from the earphones into the machine and put the earphones over his ears. The movements of his hands were quick and precise. He was excited and breathed loudly and quickly through his mouth. He kept on talking to himself with little words of comfort and encouragement, as though he were afraid that the machine might not work, and afraid also of what might happen if it did. The needle crept slowly across the dial, and suddenly he heard a shriek, a frightful, piercing shriek, and he jumped and dropped his hands, catching hold of the edge of the table. He stared around him as if expecting to see the person who had shrieked. There was no one in sight, except the woman in the garden next door, and it was certainly not she. She was bending down, cutting yellow roses and putting them in her basket. Again it came, a throatless, inhuman shriek, sharp and short, very clear and cold. The note itself possessed a minor, metallic quality that he had never heard before. Klausner looked around him, searching instinctively for the source of the noise. The woman next door was the only living thing in sight. He saw her reach down, take a rose stem in the fingers of one hand, and snip the stem with a pair of scissors. Again he heard the scream. It came at the exact moment when the stem was cut.
Unit 7, Tape Script 7.1.
Good morning, London Eye. How can I help you?
Right. I'd like 6 tickets for the London Eye, please.
Certainly. When for?
Today. Now.
I'm sorry, sir, but all today's tickets are sold out.
Oh, I didn't realize you had to book in advance.
Well, it's not always necessary, but this is a holiday weekend and the weather's good. It's always really busy on weekends like these. I could offer you something for Monday.
Oh, well, I guess we'll have to come on Monday then.
So what time would you like? I could offer you early morning or late afternoon.
Oh, early morning preferably. That way we'll miss the crowds.
Yes? And how will you be paying?
By credit card, if that's okay.
That's fine, sir. If you could just give me your credit card details, then you can collect the tickets from the ticket office on Monday, just before your trip on the Eye.
Sure. It's an American Express card, and the number is 5443788.
Unit 7, Tape Script 7.2.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we go on the Eye, first I'd just like to give you a little information about London itself. The London Eye stands on the River Thames, and many of the city's most famous landmarks are nearby. This is no coincidence. It is because of the river that London was founded here in the first place. The Romans settled in Londinium, as it was called, at the beginning of the first millennium because the river was vital to trade and travel. The city grew, but the river was always at its heart, importing and exporting goods for sale around the world and providing a safer alternative to travelling by road. But the river brought problems too. Flooding and freezing were frequent, and pollution was to be expected in such a busy waterway. However, conditions have greatly improved on the river, especially in the last 20 years or so, and the Thames Barrier is now London's first defence against floods. The relationship of the Thames to London changed profoundly when the big container ships of the 20th century could no longer navigate the river and went elsewhere. Since then, the Thames has become a source of pleasure to Londoners with its riverbank developments. As for the Eye itself, it took 7 years to complete. It was built to celebrate the new millennium, and the interesting thing is that it was constructed piece by piece throughout Europe. As it was the biggest observation wheel ever designed, there was no single place where it could be built. The main structure was built in Holland, the centre part was built in the Czech Republic, the cables were made in Italy, and the capsules in France. So it is a truly European project. Now, if you would just like to follow me, and please keep close together as I have all the tickets and it's impossible to get on the Eye without a ticket.
Unit 7, Tape Script 7.3.
The train now boarding on platform 3 is the 7:15 to Glasgow Central. The train now standing at platform 7 is the late-running 6:30 to Edinburgh Waverley. We apologise to passengers for the delay in boarding this evening, but this is due to the late arrival of the incoming train. Would passengers kindly remain in queue C while the train is being prepared for boarding? At the moment, this is estimated to be between 10 and 20 minutes. Please listen carefully for further announcements. For the information of passengers, there is a restaurant serving dinner on board the train and a buffet offering hot and cold snacks. A trolley service serving light refreshments is also available. Passengers are kindly requested to check that they are in possession of valid tickets for this journey. Saver tickets cannot be used on this service.
Unit 7, Tape Script 7.4.
I'd much rather go to Tower Bridge than visit the London Eye.
Well, I'd prefer to visit the London Eye, because it's a lovely day, and the view should be fantastic.
Actually, I think the Globe Theatre would be much more interesting than either of those.
Personally, I find the theatre rather boring.
Me too. I don't find the Globe half as interesting as most of the other things we could visit.
Right, let's go to the London Eye then.
Unit 7, Tape Script 7.5.
Our first visit is to Buckingham Palace. The palace has been the main residence of the sovereign since Queen Victoria. The grand statue in front of the palace celebrates Victoria as Queen and Empress. Crowds of tourists gather around the statue and the palace railings at 11:30 every day during the summer to watch the changing of the guard. Now we'll go down the Mall to Trafalgar Square. Admiral Lord Nelson stands on top of his tall column in the middle of the square. Nelson died during the Battle of Trafalgar, and the square is named after this famous naval victory. At the north side of the square is the National Gallery. The gallery houses the major national collection of art from around the world. Our next stop is Piccadilly Circus, London's hub. 5 major roads converge here, and at the centre is the statue of Eros. We go along Shaftesbury Avenue, past many theatres, on our way towards Holborn and the City of London. We move on now to one of the newest sights of London. The Millennium Bridge was opened in 2000 and promptly closed again because it wobbled. The bridge links St Paul's Cathedral in the City of London to Tate Modern on the south bank of the River Thames. Originally Bankside Power Station, the gallery is a work of art in itself. Our last stop today is the Tower of London. In its 900-year history, the Tower has been a royal palace, a fortress, a prison and place of execution, a menagerie, and a mint. In St. Martin's Tower, we'll see the crown jewels. This magnificent collection includes the crown worn by Queen Victoria at her coronation. The yeoman warders, or beefeaters, as they are known, are excellent guides. They'll tell you all the history and legends of the tower.
Unit 8, Tape Script 8.1.
Taylor Homes and Intercontinental Systems have joined forces to build what they see as the homes of the future in a new development just outside London. It's hoped that the complex will be completed by the end of next year. The houses, which are outwardly similar to many modern homes, have inbuilt intelligence and many other applications which the builders think will radically change the work and leisure routines of those who live there. To anyone glancing around the inside, the only noticeable difference is the extra electric wiring and sockets. There are more than 70 telephone, TV, computer and power sockets in every single room in the home. However, a closer inspection reveals that, hidden behind various electronically operated doors, potential owners will find robots able to cook meals and run baths for them, machines which will do their ironing and their laundry in minutes, on-the-spot hairdressing and manicure units, and last but not least, a computer which will plan every day of their lives for an entire year. This technology need not be exclusive to the well-off or the young and trendy. Installing the kind of technology that smart homes like these contain in the ordinary homes of today will enable the elderly and the disabled to maintain their independence for a great deal longer than they can at present. This may have profound psychological benefits for them, as well as greatly reducing the need for full-time carers and supervised accommodation.
Unit 8, Tape Script 8.2.
In the studio today, I have with me Harry and Wendy Saunders, a husband and wife team who are just about to set out to walk to both the North and South Poles. Welcome to you both.
Thanks.
Now, where did this burning ambition come from? Was it a childhood dream? It seems a very tall order, walking to both poles. It's not the kind of thing that most married couples plan, is it?
Absolutely not. But we've been interested in the poles ever since we went on a trip to the Antarctic. We actually planned it to be our honeymoon. No one could understand why we wanted to go to what seemed the most remote place on Earth. But we were fascinated by the pictures we'd seen on TV of the wildlife and also by the climate.
But what sort of training have you had for an expedition like this? It's going to be the first time you've attempted anything so ambitious, isn't it?
Of course, but it's not as if we don't know what we're doing. We've taken part in shorter treks and have done some fairly intensive training in the mountains in Scotland and in freezing and icy conditions. But as you say, it's not quite the same as coping with the conditions we're going to find at the North Pole.
Now, you've got a support team who will also come to your rescue if things go wrong. How long do you anticipate the trip will take you?
Even with the support team, we reckon between 55 and 65 days. We'll ski across the ice cap. It's not easy because the ice is always moving and temperatures can get as low as -50. Wow. You might actually walk 3 miles in the direction of the pole, then find that the ice cap has drifted 3 miles southwards.
But how will you cope with that? It must be a setback on such a long trek.
Naturally, it will be disappointing. But you have to be tough, mentally and physically, to even consider doing something like this. We've even had to put on weight to make sure we've got enough reserves for what lies ahead.
And is there anything else you have to look out for? Besides the melting ice, I mean.
Well, what's disturbing me more than anything else is a chance encounter with a polar bear. If we meet one of those, we'll be in real danger. We've packed our rifle just in case, but what's also going to be tough is pulling the sledges. They'll weigh up to twice our body weight. We're going to need a lot of food and supplies, and they're certainly not light.
So, what's the upside? What will you get out of all this?
Apart from the personal satisfaction, we're actually trying to raise money for charity. But the landscape itself is just so wonderful, so dramatic. It's like nothing else on Earth. There's this tremendous feeling of space. You have to negotiate what are called pressure ridges. They're often about 30 feet in height. They're formed by the ice crushing up on itself, so they're a bit like high hills. But they're magnificent, and the sun just gleams off the top of them. And there are rainbows like picture postcards that circle all around you. They say if you sit on the top of one of these ridges at night, you feel at peace with the world. I can't wait.
So what are your chances? How many people have tried to do this before you?
Actually, only 72 people are thought to have made it to the North Pole on foot or helped by dogs. We know that we'll never be in the same league as the great Arctic explorers, but we know that our nearest and dearest will be really proud of us, even if we don't make it.
And do you believe in luck? Are you going to take anything with you that might bring you luck on the first polar journey you attempt?
Funny you should mention luck. We're actually taking our mascot, a small black cat called Risotto.
Oh.
Naturally, it's a toy and not the real thing. But we're going to strap it to the sledge and hope that it will look after us if we need it.
And what will happen if you suddenly find that you can't stand each other a minute longer and you're right in the middle of nowhere?
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Frankly, that's the least of our worries. We've been through a lot together, and we're not going to ruin this trip by letting stupid arguments come between us. Besides, we'll be too busy concentrating on survival to worry about not getting on with each other.
Wendy, Harry, thanks for talking to us today, and good luck with the trip. Now, next up we have...
Unit 8, Tape Script 8.3. 1.
Of course, but it's not as if we don't know what we're doing.
2.
We've even had to put on weight to make sure we've got enough reserves for what lies ahead.
3.
Well, what's disturbing me more than anything else is a chance encounter with a polar bear.
4.
They're formed by the ice crushing up on itself.
5.
They say if you sit on the top of one of these ridges at night, you feel at peace with the world.
6.
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Frankly, that's the least of our worries.
7.
We've been through a lot together, and we're not going to ruin this trip by letting stupid arguments come between us.
Unit 8, Tape Script 8.4. 1.
It's not the kind of thing that most married couples plan, is it?
2.
You might walk 3 miles in the direction of the pole, then find that the ice cap has drifted 3 miles southwards.
3.
We're going to need a lot of food and supplies, and they're certainly not light.
4.
There's this tremendous feeling of space.
5.
And what will happen if you suddenly find that you can't stand each other a minute longer and you're right in the middle of nowhere?
Unit 8, Tape Script 8.5.
It's difficult to say exactly how difficult it might be to do these things.
I suppose cycling might be the easiest. Everybody knows how to cycle, don't they?
Surely rowing up the Amazon would be the most difficult. Rowing must be hard work, mustn't it?
I'd rather row up the Amazon than sail across the Atlantic. It can't be much fun being stuck on a yacht in the middle of an ocean for weeks on end, can it?
Unit 8, Tape Script 8.6.
I don't think supporting organic produce would be nearly as useful as helping the homeless, do you?
That would definitely be my last choice. although I think organic produce is better. No, I think we should help to protect wildlife. For me, that's much more important than organic produce. In fact, I think it's the most important of all.
Unit 8, Tape Script 8.7. Fahrenheit 451.
The trees overhead made a great sound of letting down their dry rain. The girl stopped and looked as if she might pull back in surprise, but instead stood regarding Montag with eyes so dark and shining and alive that he felt he had said something quite wonderful. But he knew his mouth had only moved to say hello, and then when she seemed hypnotized by the salamander on his arm and the phoenix disc on his chest, he spoke again. "Of course," he said. "You're a new neighbor, aren't you?" "And you must be?" She raised her eyes from his professional symbols. "The fireman." Her voice trailed off. She turned to face the sidewalk, going towards their homes. "Do you mind if I walk back with you? I'm Clarice McClellan." "Clarice? Guy Montag. Come along. What are you doing out so late, wandering around? How old are you?" There was only the girl walking with him now, her face bright as snow in the moonlight, and he knew she was working his questions around, seeking the best answer she could possibly give. "Well," she said, "I'm 17 and I'm crazy. My uncle says the two always go together. When people ask your age," he said, "always say 17 and insane. Isn't this a nice time of night to walk? I like to smell things and look at things, and sometimes stay up all night walking and watching the sunrise." They walked on again in silence, and finally she said thoughtfully, "You know, I'm not afraid of you at all." He was surprised. "Why should you be?" "So many people are. Afraid of firemen, I mean. But you're just a man, after all." And then Clarice McClellan said, "Do you mind if I ask, how long have you worked at being a fireman?" "Since I was 20, 10 years ago." "Do you ever read any of the books you burn?" He laughed. "That's against the law." "Oh, of course." "But it's fine work. Monday, burn Millet. Wednesday, Whitman. Friday, Faulkner. Burn 'em to ashes, then burn the ashes. That's our official slogan." They walked the rest of the way in an uncomfortable silence. When they reached her house, all its lights were blazing. What's going on? Montag had rarely seen so many house lights. "Oh, it's just my mother and father and uncle sitting around talking. It's like being a pedestrian, only rarer. My uncle was arrested another time. Did I tell you? For being a pedestrian. Oh, we're most peculiar." "But what do you talk about?" She laughed at this. "Good night." She started up her walk. Then she seemed to remember something and came back down to look at him with wonder and curiosity. "Are you happy?" she said. "Am I what?" he cried. But she was gone, running in the moonlight, her front door shut gently.
Unit 9, Tape Script 9.1.
As part of their training, London taxi drivers have to be tested on the knowledge, their knowledge of streets, places and landmarks in the London area. It seems they have the knowledge by name and the knowledge by nature. London taxi drivers, that rare breed who can find a shortcut, turn a taxi on a postage stamp and recite poetry all at the same time, are revealed by scientists to have bigger brains. An article in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, a prestigious American journal, reports that London researchers scanned the brains of London cabbies and found that in all cases, the size of a region of the brain called the hippocampus was millimetres larger than in a comparable group of 30 ordinary men who did not drive taxis. The hippocampus is closely associated with spatial memory, in other words, where the brain keeps its maps. London taxi drivers, famous for knowing routes between thousands of places in the city, spend 2 years assembling a detailed map, which they file away in the memory.
Unit 9, Tape Script 9.2.
The hippocampus is where we store the things we consciously remember. As part of that, we could include navigation. We know that in animals, navigation and the hippocampus are intimately linked. So it would seem now is the human hippocampus. Tests showed that if any part of a creature's hippocampus was damaged, the animal could no longer find its way around. Ordinary mortals, too, have shown that they use the hippocampus to find their way around. But the brains of London taxi drivers grew to accommodate the layout of the whole city. They are an excellent group to study. They've acquired a vast amount of spatial information. It's the kind of thing you can only do in this city because taxi drivers elsewhere aren't licensed in the same way. We had previously placed volunteer drivers in scanners, quizzed them on the best routes round London, and watched their brains fire up. This time, we simply invited them to lie back, silently, and have their grey matter measured by 2 different techniques. What we did was look at the amount of time spent as a taxi driver and then looked at the brain measurements. We found a significant correlation in that the back part of the hippocampus increased in size. The longer you had been a taxi driver, the bigger the brain got.
Unit 9, Tape Script 9.3. Example.
Knowledge. Knock. Kind.
1.
Right. Worried. Wrong.
2.
When. Which. Why.
3.
House. Honest. Hour.
4.
Ignore. Signal. Sign.
5.
Racial. Crucial. Trial.
6.
Conscious. Science. Scream.
7.
Built. Bullet. Guilt.
Unit 9, Tape Script 9.4.
My research has shown that our upbringing is far more important than our education.
This would appear to be true from my own research. On the other hand, I don't think we should underestimate the importance of education. I personally feel that our status in life is often a direct result of our educational background.
Overall, it would seem that both are as important as each other.
Unit 9, Tape Script 9.5.
If, like me, you're always forgetting things, you'll be very interested in our next guest. Professor Abrahams has been looking at how memory works. Professor Abrahams, is it possible to improve your memory?
Yes, it is. But you've got to go about it the right way. Some people think they'll get better at memorising things if they practice a lot, but it doesn't work that way.
You mean just repeating the list won't help?
Yes. One important study tested some university students on their ability to memorise poetry, the meaning of Turkish words, dates of historical events, and so on. One group practised memorising things, the second group learned techniques for remembering things, and the third group did nothing at all. When they were tested again, The group that had learned techniques for memorising things did much better on the test than the others. The students who had practised memorising things and the students who had done nothing at all did about the same on the test as they did before.
So you don't get better at memorising things just by doing it more, but you can get better by learning how to do it. What sort of things can you do?
If you just repeat a list, comb, book, can of beans, left shoe, and so on, you are using your working memory. Your working memory is great for jobs like remembering a phone number for a few minutes, but very soon you'll forget it. Your working memory can only hold a little bit of information for a short time. If you want to remember more things for longer, you need to put them into what we call your long-term memory. You do that by connecting new information to memories that you already have, by what scientists call elaborative encoding. You move that list of objects out of your working memory and into your long-term memory.
And how do you do that?
Well, there are a number of ways. One simple one is the mnemonics we all used at school to remember the planets in the solar system.
Oh, yes. My very easy method just speeds up naming planets.
Yes, that's right. The first letters give you Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Yeah. Another way is to tell yourself a story, and you associate each item you want to remember with an event in the story. That way, a random list becomes a meaningful sequence. It's hard to remember all the items in a list where nothing is connected to anything else. It's easier to remember when one item is attached to a whole lot of others. Making a mental picture, giving yourself a visual clue, also helps you remember something later.
I'll give it a try. Thank you very much, Professor Abrahams.
Unit 10, Tape Script 10.1.
Well, here we are in Northern Virginia, and we're actually here for the first ever reenactment of the long battle fought for the mule shoe. It's actually a warm and sunny Saturday morning. In fact, nothing at all like the scene at 5 o'clock this morning when the first battle of the day was taking place. It was very misty this morning, and the area was covered in artillery smoke. What must it have been like for those soldiers on the morning of the real battle in 1864, I wonder? Well, thankfully, we'll probably never know. But certainly from where we're standing now, the cavalry battle almost looks like the real thing. Each soldier looks determined in his desire to win the battle, and is dressed exactly as he would have been in those days. And the weapons are all authentic copies too. But don't worry, we've been assured that nobody actually gets hurt in these battles. In fact, nobody seems to be falling off their horses either, but it's a truly amazing spectacle.
Unit 10, Tape Script 10.2.
1.
I was working in London as a travel writer for a magazine. I was getting a bit jaded with city life, and I'd just broken up with my girlfriend. Anyway, I'd been sent to this amazingly beautiful place in California to do an article on a self-sufficient community. While I was there, I came across an advertisement for a room to let in a house up in the hills, miles from anywhere. I made a snap decision to go and see it. I had the most terrifying journey on dirt track roads to reach it, but when I eventually got there, there was no doubt in my mind at all. This was the place for me, job or no job.
2.
People still can't believe we did it. I've been working as an engineer in Britain for a few years. It was hard work, and I was getting fed up with travelling around the country. Well, Mary and I came to the West Indies on holiday and began to realise that there were alternatives to the daily grind. I gave the matter a lot of thought. I reckoned if we sold our house at home, we could just about afford to open a guest house here. Mind you, all our relatives said we were completely mad and we'd soon get sick of it, but here we are, with no regrets at all.
3. About 3 years ago, my house was destroyed in a storm, and by some strange coincidence, a 727 Continental Airlines plane was heading for the end of its natural life in a nearby scrapyard. I paid $4,000 to haul it to a plot of land overlooking the lake and make it my permanent home. The neighbors weren't exactly overjoyed. They thought it would lower the tone of the area, which it didn't. Unfortunately, some youngsters in the neighborhood stole one of the emergency exit doors. But it's okay now. I've converted the cockpit into the washroom and the first-class compartment into a bedroom. Actually, I still have most of the original features, apart from the wings and the nose cone.
4.
I was earning huge sums of money as a recruitment consultant, and it was great for a while, but it all got too much. I became exhausted and miserable. I spent ages looking through brochures and finally decided that I would enrol on a circus skills course. It turned out that I had a knack for clowning around, and I couldn't believe it when I was offered my own solo performances in hospitals around London. Eventually, I got a job as a clown in a real circus, so I bought a camper van to travel around in. My family couldn't understand why I'd given up such a successful career, but now they support me 100%.
5.
I was a police officer. It was a 24-hour-a-day job, and the stress was beginning to have an effect on my relationships. I was staying on a sheep farm in Wales, and one morning I found myself on a mountain top with a shepherd's crook in one hand and a friendly lamb at my side. I slowly began to realise that I could make a living out of being a shepherd. My friends couldn't believe it at first. They thought that I'd lost my mind. I had to sell my house, and I'm now living on the farm. I'm earning very little. I miss my friends, and it's jolly hard work too. But it's a dream compared to being a police officer.
6.
Modestly speaking, I'm brilliant at tennis. Everyone said I'd be up there with the world champions if I really trained hard. And I did train hard. It was every evening, every weekend. It just went on and on. And then there was all the travelling to tournaments, dragging my family all over the place. In the end, I decided it wasn't worth the effort. I had no social life, no friends. It took me a long time to realise that there were other things in life besides tennis. Everyone was disappointed, but they could understand why I made the decision to give it all up.
Unit 10. Tape script 10.3.
1.
Area. T. Reach.
2.
Door. Soon. Room.
3.
Head. Great. Said.
4.
Look. Book. Pool.
5.
Work. Fork. Talk.
6.
Huge. Hug. Few.
7.
Plain. Plain. Plan.
8.
First. Hurt. Worth.
Unit 10. Tape script 10.5.
Sports stars and pop stars are favourites with the advertisers. Children will pester their parents to buy the brand their heroes promote because they see it as a way of getting close to the stars they admire. Parents have criticised pop stars and sports stars who promote fatty, sugary or salty foods to children. What do our listeners think? Our first caller is Angie from Hastings. Hello, Angie. Are you a parent?
Hello? Yes, I've got one little boy. He's 10.
And what's your view, Angie?
Well, I think these celebrities could be the best people to educate children about healthy and unhealthy food. It's a shame that they use their influence to push high salt, high sugar snacks when they could be educating children about healthy eating. That way they'd do some good.
Thank you. And here's Ben from London. Ben, what have you got to say?
What people forget, I think, is that children aren't fat because they eat snacks like crisps. It's okay to eat crisps as part of your diet. The problem is that children don't get enough exercise. They need games and PE lessons at school.
Thank you, Ben. Now let's hear from Caroline. Caroline, where are you from?
Hello, I'm from West London and I've got 2 children. They're 8 and 6. I have to say that I actually like these ads. A lot of them are great fun. They make my children laugh. It's just such a shame they aren't being used for something else, something healthier.
Thank you, Caroline. Now let's have an expert opinion. Dr. David Black is a nutritionist.
Yes, that's right. From my point of view, I think it's a shame that stars promote crisps, which are full of fat and salt, and sugary fizzy drinks. I bet they don't eat and drink the products they promote. People still don't realise how unhealthy these salty snacks and sugary drinks are. It's a real problem. 1/5 of children are now overweight. The vast majority eat too much saturated fat, and over half eat too much salt. The independent view is that obesity is most likely to be the result of a poor diet combined with a lack of exercise. In spite of the clear evidence that diet has the most important role to play in health, these celebrities insist we should concentrate only on exercise and leave their precious ads alone.
OK, now we've just time for one more call. Can you give us your name, please?
Hello, my name's Elaine. The question I want to ask is, why do the stars do these ads? They don't need the money, do they? It would be much better if they acted as positive role models. I think it's especially important for sporting personalities.
Unit 10. Tape script 10.6. The charge of the Light Brigade.
Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said, into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Flashed as they turned in air, sabring the gunners there, charging an army, while all the world wondered, plunged in the battery smoke. Right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian reeled from the sabre stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made, all the world wondered. Honour the charge they made, honour the Light Brigade, noble 600.
Progress Test 2.
1.
There are still some patches of fog around, chiefly in the Midlands, and also in northwest England, with a particularly thick chunk in the Manchester Airport area just now. That's around the fringes of southern Greater Manchester and into Cheshire, with some possible disruption to flights. That'll take a few hours to clear.
2.
In Scotland, it's dry just about everywhere. The Highlands and Islands are rather cloudy, though, and any sightings of the sun here are best regarded as a bonus. It will be quite blustery, and in southern Scotland there could be gusts of strong wind. Temperatures for Scotland around 8 to 10 degrees.
3.
And now for England and Wales. Temperatures are still at or near freezing, so there could be ice underfoot. Those fog patches I mentioned should disperse in an hour or two. Then really a very nice day with blue skies, almost unbroken sunshine with maybe just a slight breeze. And after that rather chilly start, temperatures of 8 to 10, which is really pretty good for the middle of February.
4.
Tonight's going to be another fine night, but the temperature will drop sharply again after dark. Temperatures in the coldest spots could get as low as -4 or -5 by the end of the night. One exception is the north and west of Scotland, where it will stay cloudy and rather windy with some drizzle around as well.
5.
Well, as a result of heavy rain, we still have 78 flood warnings with one severe flood warning. After a widespread frost, it'll be milder today, but will still feel quite chilly. Temperatures will drop tonight, and tomorrow we'll see more patchy rain and 1 or 2 heavier showers.
9. Listen to the 5 extracts once more and decide if statements A to E are true or false.